drilling down into the science today. We're going to look at indisputable science. All right? This is part of the class where we look at the good stuff. In my opinion, the most valuable position in the class will be today, which is the physical evidence. Today is the 26th. June 9th is our final session. This will be my capstone lecture. So that's my international conference lecture. I'm going to be laying out all of the data. I'm also going to be giving you our final closing arguments for this course. And then we're going to be voting. And to determine if Mr. Townsend has met the burden of proof and has kept his promise to provide evidence that proves Bigfoot beyond any reasonable doubt. The same standard of evidence that puts people in the prison for the rest of their lives. All right? The absolute highest possible proof. So make sure. Feel free to, we've got a lot of extra seats. Feel free to invite any of your friends for this final session. I'll be doing a tape. We're going to do a video for Amazon. But once again, it'll be in the back. And it'll be a real treat because I'm going to lay out all of my prints, all kinds of cool stuff. And that way when you go and look at other Bigfoot researchers' information, you have something to compare it against. Science versus campfire stories, I like to say. So, once again, our primary texts, hybrid hominid, Gigantopithecus blacki, giant, and relic hominid, and Captain Mossford strain provide us with the Native American ethnographic information. Today, this is what we're going to be looking at. Prints and tracks. Most important information, in my opinion, besides my own research. We're looking at nests, sticks, and structures. Pretty popular area of research right now. Glyphs, structures, lines, those kinds of things. And the manipulation of sticks as well. Then we're going to be getting into the bones and stone stacking information. And look at a few videos, one from Reno, which is a top researcher out of Utah right now. And we're going to be looking at some DNA analysis and examination from one of my colleagues, Dr. Melba Ketchum, whose analysis is pretty solid. It's been, how shall I say, poo-pooed or disrespected, or another word would be misunderstood. And however, it stands up, and we're going to be discussing that. And then at the end, we're going to talk about the implication and questions related to this information superimposed against the three origination theories. Remember, hybrid hominid, relic hominid, or Gigantopithecus blacki. At any time during this presentation, if you have a question, say hello and ask it, because I'm going to answer your questions as we move forward. You don't have to wait till the end, because I want to address it as we move forward. So if it's kind of off, I'll say, listen, this is where we're at. I'll be happy to sit with you at the end of the class and discuss it. So we try to stay on task.
What was your time frame for June 9th lecture?
The June 9th is going to be
3 o'clock or something like that?
Say again?
Was it from like 1 to 3 o'clock your June 9th?
Oh, no, it's going to be the same time frame.
Oh, 11 to 1.
Same time frame, 11 to 1. And like I said, feel free to bring your friends. All right. Keep in mind these things today. What are the examples of track and print data? Sticks, structures, and nests are the reliable, these types of things. Both stick data, DNA, and are there any patterns? Remember, we're looking for patterns, just like my last course. We're looking for patterns to emerge. Behavioral patterns, morphology, body structure patterns, all right? Footprint patterns, all right? Eating behavioral patterns, that's called neoichnology or trace information, right? Behavioral evidence. All right, the first thing we're going to look at today is print and track evidence. Most people don't, correction, excuse me. Here is what we're going to be looking at today before we get to the first piece. Sticks, constructions, bone stacks, rock stacks, and most people don't realize that there's a large amount of other types of information related to prints, including the from body cast, knuckle prints, an anatomically correct buttocks print with female anatomy, as well as other types of tracks. So what we're going to focus on today is primarily the footprint morphology, but I want to make you aware that there's other types of anatomically correct expressions of the morphology of the body expressed in prints. right? Not just footprints. All right, before we get started, let's talk about fakes. Let's talk about fakes and the fakers themselves. All right, Roy Wallace from Toledo was not the original faker. All right, we have some serious fakers, including Rand Mullins, and these are all around Mount St. Helens as well. So way before Roy Wallace. All right, he was the gentleman that was supposedly involved in a lot of the fakes down in California and up here in Washington. Having said that, there's a lot of ways to fake a footprint, all of them easily discovered, and we'll discuss that today. Rand Mullins was faking footprints way before the Patterson-Gimlin film. All right, way before any of these guys. So this has been going on for a long time. Okay, I would say, a long time, almost 100 years. One of the interesting things about a Sasquatch track line, right, is the in-line alignment of the footprints. All right? If you look at your own way of walking, we have a different hip structure and foot structure than Sasquatch does. Okay? So we're going to leave a varying line of tracks. Okay? Because of the articulated hip structure of a Sasquatch, it leaves its tracks primarily in a straight line. So there is one of your first clues as far as a fake or hoax is concerned, is the distribution of the track line itself, based upon the hip morphology of the organism that's making the tracks. Right? So even if a human being had these footprints on, it would still not generate that track line, which is straight, based upon the morphology of our hips. All right? First clue. Your second clue is this. Most of the crude fakes, including this one, show a carved footprint. They don't show any dermal ridges. In other words, if you look at your hands right now, you see fingerprint ridges. Those are called dermal ridges. You have those on your feet as well. All right? Those are footprints, those are fingerprints that are individual identifiers of each one of us. Right? Alright. So, also, we have bone structures in our feet that are, when they're expressed in the soil, they're easily identifiable. But you don't see the bone structures in these examples of fakes because they're flat cutouts. Alright? So, there's another clue. You're not seeing anatomically correct bone structures expressed in their carvings because they're not scientists, so they don't know what it's supposed to look like. Here's one of Roy Wallace's fakes, they say. However, the authenticity of this photograph has never been in dispute. Only the person who bought it, Ray Wallace, is a faker, so the picture must be a fake as well. However, it seems to show some kind of large creature that looked like the Patterson-Gimlin film with a smaller one. Now that's interesting, okay? Because it may be a fake, old picture. It looks pretty similar to what we see in the Patterson-Gimlin film. So if that was an ape suit in the Patterson-Gimlin film as a fake, there's the suit right there. Same time, same area, same look. If it's a fake, there's the suit right there. Secondly, a footprint is a dynamic transfer of energy. It's not a cookie cutter. When you walk, your feet transfers energy in a specific pattern with pressure points on a specific way in a predictable hemispherical region. In other words, if we look at the science of leaving a footprint in any substrate, it has a specific and predictable process that it has to go through in order to create that latent image. Right? Every organism that leaves a footprint has a different process because they have different bone structures and different distribution of their weight across their body. Are they running? Are they trotting? Are they walking? What is the elevation What is the structure? Is it dirt? Is it sand? Is it rock? Is it dust? All of these take into account what the end result is going to look like. But it doesn't change fundamental facts, length of the stride and step, linearity of the track line itself, and remember, the bone structures within the foot are not expressed in the fakes that are carved from the boards. Now, do we have that technology today to do this? Yes, we do. All right, with modern movie FX. They didn't have it in 1928. Roy Wallace has been called out several times, and his son tried to demonstrate how he made these footprints by being drugged behind a car and jumping from step to step. Fourth clue. The stride distance between footprints on a Sasquatch is double the distance of a modern human being, including a basketball player. So, to drag him behind a car, he had to jump and get drugged by a car to the next step. And you can obviously see that because you can see the drag marks and the dynamic transfer of the foot signature doesn't match. All right? Not to mention the great weight it would take in order to press the substrate down, in order to make a track that's 1 to 2 inches deep. So, was unable to recreate the length, the distance, the depth, and the bone morphology. In other words, it's easy to tell the difference between a real track and a fake track. Period. Even today, even if they had an anatomically correct footprint, they still can't reproduce the distance between the two or the amount of pressure it takes to put that into the ground. You couldn't jump 72 inches with 900 pounds on your back. It's not possible. Let alone a track length of 5 or 6 miles up the side of a mountain. All right? So, crude fakes. Crude fakes. Let's take a look at some science. 702 footprints. Remember, underneath these are all the scientific papers. So if you run your mouse over here, you're going to see a link underneath, and this one is the link to Henry Fahrenbach's 702 Bigfoot footprint examination. And I'm not sure if everybody knows what a bell-shaped curve is. It's a statistical expression of data that shows an accuracy of a specific series of data. So in other words, if we see a bell-shaped curve as opposed to a triangle or an elliptical, the validity or the accuracy of that observation is much higher. All right, it's just a statistical expression. That's all it is, mathematical expression. And the statistical expression in 702, and the average is approximately 15 by 6 by 7.2 at the tarsal break and a 4.8 inch heel. All right, which leaves us roughly a length to width proportionality of about 40 to 42%. In other words, fatter and wider. Homo sapien, longer and more slender, except when it's a baby. And when you're a baby, you have about 40% length to width ratio. As we get older, our feet get longer and more slender. Okay? In addition to that, I told you, a footprint is a dynamic transfer of energy into a substrate. There's displacement of material on all sides. From that information, you can tell how it was going, what direction it was moving. Was it running? Was it walking? Was it trotting? Okay, you can also tell how much it weighed, roughly, by how deep the print is and what type of substrate. All right, roughly. You can also tell what type of weather was occurring. Was it a rainstorm? Was it dry? When was the last time it rained? Which gives you a clue as to how old that track is. From that, understanding that it's about 72 inches, then you can find the next track. Here's one, 72 inches around there somewhere is the next track. And then that's how you track a Sasquatch, track and stick. You just move to the next 72 inches. because they hide their tracks. In addition to that, we have a different bone structure. Look at compared to human beings, Homo sapien. Very similar, okay, but it's got a main toe that's just a little bit longer than ours, yet, comparative to an ape, not an earlier human being. So what you're looking at is this. As far as the length is concerned, it's somewhere in between. Gorilla, Homo sapien. Sasquatch has a little longer central toe. Not much. So this piece of information suggests that a Sasquatch toe is a hybrid toe because it has similar properties as the gorilla in length, also as a human being in Africanus, Australopithecus afarensis. So it's very close in this range. Remember, hybrid hominid includes relic hominid and Gigantopithecus black guy. It's the comprehensive theory that includes both of those itself. As this creature moves up a substrate, we go from heel to toe. Heel to toe. Our feet are patterned after a long-distance runner. Okay, marathon runners. Bigfoot's foot is patterned after mountain climbers. The whole front axis of the foot, called the tarsal brake, is more flexible than ours and gives us much longer and more inch per square foot purchase on the side of a hill. And this will be expressed in what's called a pressure ridge. And you'll see that as this creature moves forward, you'll have a little buildup of dirt right there. You don't see that in a fake because it doesn't have the bone morphology. Dermal ridges are important because almost all fakes do not have the ability to simulate dermal ridges. They just can't do it because the amount of, unless you were set it up in some kind of mud or some kind of substrate that was easily identifiable, and we don't see that in the majority of the footprints because they're not usually staged and they're found in isolated areas, which means, logically, that they're either an obvious hoax or authentic. So what I'm going to do before I start the next individual lectures on this phenomenon is to lay out some examples of the life cycle of a Sasquatch, including babies, well, little prints, Littlefoot we call them. So here's your babies. Here is your prime of your life adult. And here is an elderly one. And they all have dermal ridges. So, the life cycle can be expressed in different sizes and variations of the same structural bone morphology. Right? This is part of the clue that this is not a hoax, it's not an alien, it's not some kind of intergenerational, global-wide hallucination. It allows you to understand that there's an organism that leaves clear and definable tracks with clear and understandable bone morphologies. All right? Basic Science 101. If it leaves a track, it's not a hallucination. It's a physical organism. Remember, we talked about this. If it is a corporeal creature, it's going to leave real information. If it's a hybrid human, it's going to leave hybrid human type information, behavioral information, etc., etc. It's going to leave physical remnants of its morphology. And we can study that against anthropology and other types of organism morphology to determine if there's commonalities and how they relate to our three origination theories. Again, the dermal ridges are unidentifiable patterns on our feet and hands and separated by species and classifications, all right? This is another clue besides tooth structures and morphological bone structures in the body that you're looking at the same organism. In this case, you're looking at an identifiable pattern of dermal ridges. So if you look at a ridge on the bottom of your foot, where do you get calluses first?
On the bottom of the foot?
Where the foot strikes the surface of the ground on a regular basis, right? Where the majority of the active force velocity is all situated, in our case, the ball of the foot. All right? Because that's what we step onto and push off from. So you're going to see a concentration. In other words, the lines are going to be closer together where the majority of the weight is pressed on the foot. That's the body's response to putting more skin where the rubber hits the road. And you can chart these in how they're expressed in the tracks. For example, a modern human obviously has more structures on the area that strikes the ground with more frequency. An orangutan has a similar structure to ours. Look at the thumb. Obviously it's walking on its thumb and its upper part of its hand. Alright? Look at the difference between a gorilla and a human being, foot-wise. Right? Similar, not the same. These are your pressure points. You see that? Pressure points. Here's your pressure point here. Here's your pressure point here, here, and there. Everybody see that? That's where the ground, that's where the foot is hitting the majority of the time. Chimpanzee, somewhere between us and them. They say, to me it looks more like an orangutan. Again, pressure point here and here. So it looks like it's walking kind of on the outside of its foot. Right?
But those all have like a dew claw or something. I mean, is that?
Well, they got an extended or opposable toe.
Okay.
They do. Okay, but according to this, you're not seeing the expression of that. So what you're looking at is when they're walking, they have to be pulling that opposable toe up. That's my guess. And you'll see it expressed when they're going like that, but for the purposes of this examination, they didn't include it. Alright, so let's look at the Sasquatch print for a second. If it has the bone structures that we're discussing, which would be here, you're looking at that here. So, where is the majority of your dermal ridges located on the examination? Right where we would expect them to be if the morphology of the foot is similar but different. Weight's different, which means the apex of the weight on that organism on its spine is in a different position. It's further forward here, and ours are further back. Alright, and the reason you can tell that is because you see how more you get here too as well, and less here. So ours are primarily walking on the balls of our foot. This creature is primarily walking on the mid-tarsal brake, right there. So its heel goes flat, and it pushes off with this area here. And in the case of this track, it has a dominant third toe. Did everybody see that? They don't always have that, but in this case it does. So, the point being for this slide is this. Tracks show a life cycle. They have dermal ridges, fingerprints, on the footprints and on some of the other tracks. Here's one right here. Here's a cut on the bottom of the foot. And I coated this with rubber so it wouldn't melt when it got rained on. But you can still see the scar on the bottom of the foot where something stepped and got cut. All right? Because when you're cut on the bottom of your foot, it fills in, but it leaves a scar. Another interesting item is the morphology of the footprint. From the baby to the elderly express the same morphology. In other words, this one's close. That's the main toe on this one. So it's got some kind of weird thing going on the left foot. However, the second toe, this is probably a little bit bigger, in this case is close because it's a baby. In this case, it's obvious. See that toe? How much further that sticks out? That's called Morton's foot. That's a congenital human defect. Only found in 10% of the Homo sapien population. None in the ape population, the chimpanzee populations. None. It's also on the prime of the life, right there. Again, hominin, congenital defect. 10% of the human population. As expressed across the life cycle of this organism. Continuity, yes ma'am.
How often are the elderly tracks found together with the small child tracks?
I am not sure. That's an interesting question. I have never seen any evidence of that. It's always been the prime of the life and the baby tracks. Even on my research that we did with the bone structures and the stacking and the teeth marks, they were prime of the life adults and juveniles, based on the track, and in the case of the juveniles, based on the mamelons, which are the protuberances on the front of the front teeth that you get when you're first getting your adult incisors. So, haven't found any. Not to say they're not there. I just haven't found them. That's it. All right, so we've got some things we want to look at, including spreading toes. When you step on something, your toes go out a little bit too. Step on some mud sometime and watch your feet spread and the stuff ooze between them. So you see your feet spread out a little bit. It's called spreading toes, and you see this reflected in the baby track as well. All right, the distance between the toes. All right, so there's one quintessential Bigfoot characteristic. You'll see a larger, much larger spread because it's a lot bigger creature and it weighs a lot more. But you still see that in us. You'll see that in apes too. Anything has a foot. There's your pressure ridge right there. Does everybody see that? They see it here too. And not so much there. Not so much there either. But definitely right there. And that, and like I said, if that was a human foot, you would see this pressure ridge up here. Because we go from heel to toe, not heel to the whole front part of the foot, which is another indication scientifically and morphologically that this creature is human-like but not human. All right?
Would that be because it has to push off with each stride with more weight?
Potentially.
More weight.
Also, it could have to do with its habitat. Okay, as an adaptive function. Some of the mountain tribes from the Himalayas still have the foot functionality of a tarsal break. We have the morphological structure. We just have a different environment. And mountain tribes generally maintain that flexibility, especially in the Himalayas. Okay, so you see it expressed in the animal kingdom and our species as well. And expressed in evidence, trace evidence that's left behind. All right? All right, so here's some footprints. Look at this skinny heel. All right, I think this is a fake. It's called the Bosberg cripple foot. They think it was a congenital defect or some kind of injury to the foot. I'm not so sure. Some of these other tracks, you'll see again, Morton's foot here, Morton's foot there. Morton's foot here. Close there. That's a weird one. 4 toes a little larger. Again, right there. This was the Patterson, again, this was the Jerry Clue Bluff Creek cast, and this was before the Patterson Gilligan, because this was in 58. Again, here, not so much there, but here as well, and there. Morton's foot. All right, so here's your mid-tarsal break, here. That is your first clue that it's not a fake. Because you notice those fakes are all uniform. They didn't have an understanding of the morphological structure of this organism. So, there's clue number 5 as far as the fake is concerned. Does it have the correct anatomical bone structure? You notice how the heel is longer and slenderer in some of these. Again, old, it suggests in the human population, as we get older, our center of weight shifts backwards. And our heel elongates and our foot becomes more slender. Look at the difference between an elderly person and a baby. We go through the life cycle just like they do, but yet maintain our morphology as expressed in our footprints just like they do. Okay? Morton's foot. Here's your link right here. It'll take you to the science behind the genetics of Morton's foot. Another thing we're looking at is the great bulbous toe. We don't see that in the human population. Not as expressed as dramatically as you see it here. And you see it in all of these examples, a disproportionate bulbous toe. Alright? Easy to fake. But another characteristic, another bone structural characteristic. Alright? We also see this leading edge. We don't see that our foot's more rounded. Alright? But you see this leading edge. Does everybody see that as well? Another clue that this is Homo erectus, but not necessarily sapien. Okay? So we're getting closer, but we're not quite there yet. Paul Graves, a researcher out of Yakima, he just did a track line in 2017. It's underneath there. His measurements are similar to mine, step and stride length. This is another research from Manny Ortiz. Also, you can't see it there. Hybrid hominid toe. Here. Right there. Morton's foot. So you're seeing not only in western Washington and eastern Washington, Blue Mountains, but you're seeing it regionally and nationally expressed the same genetic defect. So who's ever faking it is probably the same faking dude, because he has a doctorate in animal anatomically correct morphological bone construction, and he's a master carver as well. FX guy. Should be easy to figure out who the guy is based upon his schooling. Alright. My research. In Mount St. Helens, we found 3 sets of bones, giant bones that have been killed by some kind of unexplained organism that have been chewed up by giant hominin-type teeth. It left footprints. We were able to track and measure those footprints back over 100 meters and pull some tracks. Once again, that is within the Henner-Fahrenbach's 702 footprint examination of 42% length to width ratio. Alright? It also had a 72-inch step with a 144-inch stride heel to heel. Double the size step, double the size length. Alright? The Paul Graves track line was very similar, only it was a smaller creature. 13-inch, 63 inches. 16-inch, 72 inches. The difference between somewhere in the juvenile range to adult range. So you're not just seeing this. If you're looking at a life cycle, you're looking at baby, you're looking at adult, juvenile, young adult, adult prime and life, adult middle age, adult old age, and adult dead. Okay, so I need like 20 different types of tracks here in order to demonstrate the whole life cycle. All right? Don't have them yet. Here's the breakdown for human beings. Side-by-side measurement. Double the size. Double the stride. Double the length of the step and stride. Okay? So, not only are we seeing this expressed in other people's research, but in my research at Mount St. Helens as well. In 3 different locations, with a comparison for females as well. Can't leave the ladies out. The Skookum body print. Interesting item. Found by Matt Moneymaker in an expedition to Skookum Meadows in 2000. Supposedly some kind of organism that they baited and it laid on its side to not leave a footprint and supposedly reached out to grab this bait. And Dr. Jeff Meldrum and some of his friends took the opportunity to examine this and came to some conclusions. Right? And, can you guys read that? No. That's terrible. The existence of multiple independent examples of footprint casts spanning 3 decades and thousands of miles, each displaying consistently distinct dermatologrifics, which is just footprints, or dermal ridges, constitutes affirmative evidence that the presence of an unrecognized North American ape. The combination of the distinctive anatomy of the foot and the details of the ridge texture and flow make the probability of a hoax unlikely. So that's Meldrum in 2005. All right? We all had the same impressions in 2005 because we were all coming off Dr. Bindernagel's book of the Great Ape Theory. All right? So remember, with scientific theory, you go to the evidence, you make a classification, new evidence comes in, you revise your theory. All right? I've taught this class as well, being a North American ape, and now I know it's not. The body cast itself, there's several different prints, including a heel print that shows a gastrocnemius arculis. And they pulled some hair out of it, and according to some of these guys, Schaller, Sarmiento, Swindler, and Meldrum, they could not attribute to any known species. So, an unknown. We had a cast made, and it's inconclusive. But it's not anything that we can examine or identify in the current ecosystem. Okay? There are other prints, and it's important to understand that. It's not just footprints. There's handprints, knuckle prints, several, and there's also an anatomically correct female footprint. And so, who hoaxed that one? That's an interesting one right here. Because the gluteus maximus is extremely overdeveloped in this organism. Okay? Not an ordinary gluteus maximus. You might say gluteus maximus on some African American populations, but you won't see it on a standard distribution of international population. Okay? By way of comparison. However, again, Homo erectus with structures that mimic our own, but much bigger. Okay? So we're looking at scaled up versions of similarities to what we have in us. But scaled up. Alright. This area is an area that I don't have a lot of confidence in, and I'll tell you straight out front. And the reason is because there hasn't been a lot of scientific research done. I've had arguments online with guys like Chris Knoll about what these things are, how they're constructed, what the materials are, and how they may be related to previous archaic Native American constructions in those areas. All right? And similar to these, and under these, I've got some videos of Chris Knowles. He's a good guy. We don't get along at all. I'll tell you up front. But he's done some good videos, and so check it out. Take a look at it. We see a lot of these twists, like these matchstick twists, and I've seen that in Bigfoot City. You'll see that if you go over there. Something is going by and shredding these trees. We don't know. It could be a wind twist. It's inconclusive. This doesn't seem to be a wind twist. You see what I'm saying? However, the glyphs, Brian Bland, who's a guy from British Columbia, he's also one of my friends, he's a friend of mine. He just did a presentation last year, I believe it was, on glyphs, and he's trying to interpret them. He gets a lot of these activities, and so if you have any questions for Brian, let me know and I'll forward them. You have to talk to Chris on your own, and don't mention my name, by the way. Just, I'm letting you know, friend. We went around and around, me and that guy. All right.
Did you get anything accomplished?
Nothing.
Exchange of knowledge?
Absolutely nothing accomplished.
Oh.
Because, and we'll take a break. And then we'll get back to actually take a look at some of this stuff. And feel free to come and look at these, and I will show you some archaeological artifacts as well. The reason is because I am the guy who asked all the hard questions. Why do you believe that? What kind of wood was it? Was there bark on it? Was there teeth marks? Was the bark, if bark was taken off, was it dropped on the ground? Were the trees, what species was the tree? What was the time of the year? What was the ingress and egress? Was the proximity to water? Were they stripped from another place, another location, and brought and constructed? Were there any hair? What is the relationship between that and the seasons? Was there Native Americans at that time in that region archaically that made a similar structure? What's the comparison? What's the material structure? How much strength does it take to move this log 6 inches from this distance to this distance? There's no scientific analysis being done on these structures and on these glyphs. There's no standard continuity of analysis. And that's why we're here to learn the scientific method. All right? Cyclical process of innovation and improvement on our data. Okay? We're not seeing that in the Bigfoot community in most of the areas of analysis. We're seeing a lot of cool videos on YouTube, but no follow-up. And no cross-comparison. And no hard questions. All right? That's why we keep reinventing the wheel. Because nobody's asking the hard questions. And when you do ask the hard questions, people, they get offended. Oh, really?
Oh, well.
You know what? And I'm like, well, you know what? If you can't even answer a few simple questions, there's not much to talk about. Because you should be able to open all of your research and answer every question, no matter how long it takes. Period. That's what I do.
Even if you don't know the answer.
If you don't, say you don't, and get back to them.
On the prints, on the gorilla, it caught my eye where I said like a dupla, but there's a terminology that you used there where it's
Disposable tongue.
Okay. So, but you don't see that on the Bigfoot.
No.
And so, to me, my way of thinking is that, I'm not going to say a Bigfoot can't climb a tree, but they're not going to swing with their hind legs from a tree like a primate would.
Yes, but
And
then...
so that's where you would need that as an opposing to
Sure.
grab a branch, to my way of thinking.
Agreed. However, lowland ground gorillas rarely get into the trees, but they still have it. It's an adaptation, and I say adaptation, it's an unused adaptation. I think that eventually that will be adapted out of that organism. For example, if a Sasquatch, let's just take a hypothetical. If it wasn't originally an ape, okay, it very well could have been. Then it came down out of the forest and started over millions of years to develop new types of habits, new types of environments, new types of hunting strategies. And so it's going to adapt its body structure in order to be more successful in that environment. I'll give you a very simple example, the voyage of the Beagle. When they got stranded in South America, down on, I think it's Tierra del Fuego, it was like 40 below zero. When the temperature rose up to like 10 below zero, everybody took off their clothes. They were all warm. Because adaptation, our bodies will acclimatize. When I got deployed overseas, it was 120 degrees. I couldn't breathe. A week later, I was running around in full combat gear and hardly sweat. Because our bodies will adapt and they will acclimatize. It's just a process of adaptation. So if you see this adaptation, it's a longer process. And I'll post a link. The foot itself is highly susceptible to adaptation, more so than the rest of the body for some reason. Some of the tribes in South America that climb trees regularly have beginning an indentation on the foot area here from gripping the side of that tree. And so after a period of 15 to 20 years, you look at these people's feet and they look misshapen or malformed. But that's not from offspring to parent. That is a cultural or a environmental adaptation. Whereas evolution would be passed on. And the other foot would come out like that congenitally.
Yeah, that's like what we were saying during the last break, whereas like, some of these conical shaped heads that you see and people say they're ETs, there's cultures that deliberately do
yes,
that from birth.
headboarding, yes.
Skull
skull elongations, yeah. The Mayans are a perfect example of that. Some Asians as well. However, at the end of the day, I believe that what we're seeing here is a species in flux, like we are. Okay? No species is stopped. We're all in the dynamic process of reacting to our environment and to pressures and climate. And I believe that this organism is in the same process that we are, that we all natural processes, organisms go through. And so I think we're going to see variations in this organism as more information comes out. My biggest pet peeve is we're not seeing the analytical research, comparative scientific research that we need to see. So, for example, I don't see a paper on babies or juveniles, Homo sapien, and what their bone structure is related to this, and how this is different from this being a right foot as a left foot, and ours are fairly symmetrical in shape and structure. Okay, so now the question is that if this species is in flux, in the adaptive flux like we are, what is the end? What is the end game? Are we evolving? Are we adapting away from each other? Or are we adapting closer to each other? And where did we come from? Do we have a parallel evolutionary development? Or are we part of the same lineage? See, there's so many questions. And really for this course, I'm just trying to prove that it exists and what it is. Then at that point, we can determine what's the best manner of studying, of analysis, of documentation, of those kinds of things. So let me get a drink of water and I'll be right back. And we'll get started. Length to width ratio. So this is archaeological proof carved in solid rock that supports these and the congenital human defect that is hybrid hominin. Hybrid hominin. Not ape and not relic hominin, by the way. So, let's move forward. Let's take a look at some rock stacks. So we have these interesting stacks in 67. I'm sure there's more everywhere, but nobody really looks for them and documents them. So, the thought is, and this is Billy Nate, back in the 60s. Interesting guy. He just passed away. God rest his soul. So, what we have here is feeding activity. A big family of Sasquatches was observed looking for organisms or ground squirrels or rock chipmunks, and they would take these big stones out looking for a meal, and then they would supposedly sniff underneath the bottom of a rock, and then they would stack them while they were digging. So instead of a dog digging for a mole, you got a Bigfoot digging for a squirrel, right? Point being is this: the rocks are so heavy and so isolated and so big and unexplainable, except for the eyewitness account, that we couldn't identify how these rocks are being stacked like this. I've seen other rock stacks in the bush, like little cairns, they call them, right? I think they're hikers, they're human hikers, really, marking trails and marking areas and stuff, but I'm not positive, all right? So there's only a few examples of known rock stacks themselves, but we have some other examples of rocks that have Bigfoot-related stuff on them, okay? So that's one. Bones, other rock here. This is one of the pictographic stones that I recovered from the dig half hour north of here in the Chehalis River. What I'm interpreting this to see is the Patterson-Gimlin stone. The stone is right here. I'll let you guys take a look at it. And what you're seeing is this. One leg, two legs, hand out, hand back, and head. Interesting with this one, there's a bladed weapon or a boomerang or something in this organism's hand. Tool use. So, I'll pull it out and we'll take a look at it. These is the first stack of bones that I found out by Ryan Lake, Packwood area. Correction, randomly sliding that way. And this was on the way up to a place called Deep Lake in 2013 where I go fishing with my brother. There's nobody up there. There's got a bushwhack up there. And I had hip problems. So I was kind of sliding off the trail to one side and I noticed bones. I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting, right? So I went over there because I'm curious. You know, everybody knows I'm curious kind of guy. Check it out, and it dawned on me that something killed these animals and sat there and chewed them up and dropped the bones between their legs. Just like we eat ribs. So I'm looking at the skulls. And they're bashed in, two of them, and they're facing downhill. And the bones are in a conical pattern from where the animals killed to where they were spread out. Skulls were bashed in. No arrow fire damage, no knife damage, no, nothing. Still red meat on some of the bones, but no scavenger activity. How do you explain that? Bones, stones, archaeological artifacts. Here's one of the rib bones that came out of that dig, out of this site. Those are not cat teeth, bear teeth, or wolverine teeth, nor who teeth. Those are insiders. And I said to myself, what's a giant human being doing up here chewing on raw bones and not breaking their teeth out? Right? And bashing in their skulls and facing everybody downhill? I'm not getting it. So I taught a class at Lower Columbia, 2014. Two of my students came up to me the next month after that class was over and found two more stacks of bones on the other side of Mount St. Helens that matched exactly. Footprints, teeth marks, everything. Skulls crushed in, one had catastrophic spinal separation. Something grabbed a bull elk, wrestled it down, and ripped it in half at the belly. Ripped the spine right out. What could do that besides a backhoe and a chain? No tool marks, no fire damage, no saw damage, no arrow marks, nothing. Fresh meat still attached, no scavenger activity. These are the bones we collected. Those are the dentition marks. These lower leg bones from that hoof sheet. We thought that might have been a tooth of some kind. It wasn't. Just no bone. Three stacks. Stack number one. That's the one I found. Stack number two. So my students found this one. Stack number three was only two bones on top of some grass. So you're not seeing the picture over here. This is Nathan Rio. He's another one of my friends. He's a researcher out of Utah. He found this bone stack. I'm going to show you the video in just a second. You guys see the incisor marks on that tooth right there? The scoops. It's scooped out. Like a spoon. Can you guys see that? Right there. Those are front teeth that bit out part of that bone. When a front tooth, you bite a piece of apple, right? If a Sasquatch came over and bit a piece out of this table, you'd see the geometric marks of his teeth left. They're called notches. That's one of our contributions to archaeological science is the term notches. That's a linear score. Linear score is it was gouged and drug out, not snapped out. It's not a notch, it's a gouge. Now the question is, Mr. Townsend, who in their right mind is going to throw some bones that still have meat on them out in the woods? Well, guess what? The Department of Fish and Wildlife, you know what they say? Washington State. The Corrally and bear dog specialist who's in charge of the predator activity to keep the cougars, the bears, and the wolverines off you when you go in the forest. He told me specifically that that's not anything I've ever seen. That's Homo sapien activity. He thinks it was an illegal hunt site of some dudes who got together and was baiting some prey animals. Because I didn't show him the footprints or anything else. It was called a blind examination. So all he looked at was the bone stack. Because I didn't want him to say, oh, not interested. He said Homo sapien. Subject matter expert. I also talked to several bear researchers. And they said the same thing. Bears don't act like that. That's not teeth marks from a bear. Period. Let's take a look at Rio's video. And see what Nathan Rio has to say. He's one of your up-and-coming researchers. Look at the ridge in the trees. Look at that.
So you have a backbone hole that's still red.
Yeah, it's still got meat on it.
It's
So something ripped the spine out, threw it up the tree, like the predator.
actually shoved between the split on the stick. It's in the root of the tree.
Notice those vertebrae were broken off. Where's the ribs?
That's disgusting. But looks like there's a face. Or, I mean, at least flesh. Oh, look, there's some bones. There's a jaw. Okay, so
Did
this
everybody hear that?
looks like it's on top of, I wouldn't really call this a structure, but there's another part of the jaw going down there. Whatever that is, the skull's sitting on top of. Holy freak.
Look at that!
Look at this.
Whoa!
See, there you go. Boom. There you go.
There you go. Boom. There you go. So, got a bone fill, got a bone stack, fresh meat still attached, no scavenger activity, right next to the freeway. It takes hands to break bones off the vertebrae, people. Can't do it with paws. Gotta go like this.
I don't usually document these very well, to be honest. This is the blood that's beef. So look at the flesh on that. Okay, perfect. Look at this stuff. We have everything here. Look at that.
Family was feeding.
Okay, so the jawbones are not together. I mean, they're close to each other, but there's some bones there. There's a pile of vertebrae.
Snapped off vertebrae. See that? Part of the vertebrae and piece of ribs.
This has to be a field there. This is freaking crazy. Okay, so what business does a homeless person or a Boy Scout or a camper or a logger or anyone, why would they do this? And again, if you think that I'm hoaxing this, or that, I'm working with other people to hoax this, or whatever you think, or I'm being hoaxed, if you think that somehow this is some sort of hoax, what's the point of doing bones and stuff?
Exactly.
Like, if you want to hoax Bigfoot, wouldn't you want to actually hoax Bigfoot? Why would you want to do all of this random, super tedious crap?
Sorry about the language.
The forest, hoping that someone like me will come along and appreciate it. This is amazing. So this is exactly what I mean when I say bone stacks. Look how I talk about kind. Oh my gosh, I just realized something. Here's stuff stacked. So there's another one. There's a couple bones. So it looks like there's some bones. Looks like they're probably.
Look at that vertebra. It's broken off. I'll show you another one.
Very throughout this area. Oh, and I also noticed that it's all pressed down. So this is all pressed down here. You know, the triangle over there.
That might be a glyph. Those thick structures things.
So here's what I want to say. This is a large animal. You can tell the ribs are consistent, and then all of a sudden there's tiny ribs. There's tiny ribs in there. There's little itty bitty ones.
They're woven in.
Maybe the same animal has small.
See how it sticks up on top? And there's a cross there. Look at that.
Hunter. But maybe the reason I think that might be significant is maybe it's two different deer.
It is.
Maybe it's several deer.
At least two. Baby.
That's incredible.
Adult.
How are you going to explain that science, Western science? What do you say to this? What do you say to this? Because, and here's the other thing, if you think that I'm hoaxing, or someone's hoaxing me, then why is it that I can find these bone stacks regularly throughout what I call Sasquatch corridors? Why is that? And why is it happening in other states?
Good
Why
question.
is it happening all across North America? How are bone stacks? I mean, heck, there's this University of Washington, I think, there's oh, I'm so sorry that I'm forgetting the name, Townsend? Or something? Somebody was studying bone stacks.
Promo there.
On the bone stacks and saying that it's primate dentition. I'm not seeing any dentition, I see a couple of staff ones, but how are you going to explain this?
Give me a few minutes.
You literally just can't go very far with a hoax explanation. You
Look at
can't,
that.
because this is reoccurring.
Look at that.
And if you're a scientist and you're skeptical of what I'm saying, why don't you just actually, you know how experimentation is a gigantic part of science and you should love to experiment? Here's what you should do to experiment. Come out with me. You can choose, come out to Utah. I will let you choose a particular mountain range or wherever. And then we will both go there and I will proceed to find these corridors with you.
Together. Listen. Something's out there. It's eating these deer and elk. It's creating patterns that are predictable. It's acting in certain ways, including prey selection, ritualistic stacking, dentition analysis, not only in this region, but in this continent as well. All over the place. I get information from back east, from Florida, from Reno, from Illinois, from everybody. Because why? Everybody's looking for tracks. But they see these bone stacks and like, what's that? That's interesting. But there's this dude out from the University of Washington, Townsend, who seems to have got a little closer to what's going on. By the way, I've never taught at the University of Washington. Teeth marks. Many different locations. Teeth marks are geometrically chartable. Right? Once you understand the pattern of that tooth mark, you can assign an organism and see if that organism lives in that ecosystem. Yes or no? What is that organism's behavior? How does it eat? What does it kill? How does it act? What does it eat? How does it breathe? How does it communicate? I talked to Dr. Craig Stanford from USC, one of the world's top contemporary primate specialists who just got back from Tanzania. And I asked him about bone stacking. And we discussed it. Apes don't stack bones. Only humans, Homo sapiens, stack bones. We collect bones, trophies, racks. We make whistles out of them. Housing materials, weapons, needles. So let's talk about some stones. As I mentioned, this is a stencil from that unknown archaeological dig. It has coordinated footprint track here in stencil format that anatomically matches what we're looking at. At minimum, this is 18,000 years old from where I recovered it. I think it's a lot older than that because it was at the lower level of the dig. The chiseling work itself is unexplained according to the University of Washington, Department of Anthropology and Archaeology, Dr. Grayson. Max Planck University, which is the premier anthropological university in Leipzig, had a visiting professor at Washington State University. I can't remember the top of his name off the top of my head. He examined also this stone. Again, not Native American, not anything that we've ever seen before, not Neolithic or Paleolithic. Then I showed him some of the stones, and they freaked out. Here is the Bigfoot stone right here. Please don't touch it. Your skin oil will transfer onto the structure itself. So when you guys can walk by and take a look at it. Here's other stones that depict Bigfoot in varying degrees of activity, including hunting, using a spear chucker, which is called an atlatl, against, grab the edges of this one, against a pterodactyl, which is an extinct dinosaur found in this region about 18,000 years ago. Coordinated in the same day. These are varying degrees of Bigfoot in daily life. Here's a couple other ones that are interesting. Here's a sperm whale. When was the last time you saw a sperm whale in Lewis County, right? There's the flukes, there's the head. I have pictures of ancient human beings using triangle-shaped spears against giant snakes. When was the last time you saw a giant snake in Lewis County that stands on its own 6 feet tall? Interesting. Either somebody saw some dinosaurs or somebody was smoking some good stuff. Regardless, we've got archaeological evidence that I collected in situ, in place, documented from 14 different sites across 1.5 miles of the Chehalis River. It's producing artifacts both in 3-dimension and pictographic stones of an unknown nature, based on the examination of the region's top authorities in Native American culture, tooling, and archaeology. They show Bigfoot with the pointed head, eyes, and some kind of necklace. Some kind of necklace that looks like the Native American spoked wheel. Interesting. This stone is here too, and let me pull it out. So you can see the face of the King Bigfoot himself. So, point being is this. We're seeing expressed in 3 dimensions on diorite stone from an archaeological dig, coordinated with organisms that look very similar to what we've been seeing contemporaneously, that have the same mathematical calculations and structures as thousands and thousands of footprints that are being discovered in all forms of life cycle in all areas of this planet except Antarctica and the Arctic that we know of. Unknown. Chew marks, bone stacking. Multiple examples, different researchers, all the way across the country. My paper's in final peer review at the Journal of Archaeological Research Sciences / Reports, which is the most prestigious archaeological journal in the world. I live here. It's in final peer review right now. I just have to send in my 5th version. All right, it has to be perfect. And I'm battling institutional bias because the scientists that I'm using to prove my theories are up in arms because they don't want their name associated with this controversy. And so they're putting all these roadblocks in front of me. And that's okay because I'll just keep knocking them down one after the other, and we'll get there. Because the evidence is what it is, right? Stones and bones. Not campfire stories. Eyewitness reports. Rock salt. Coordinated mathematically and morphologically with all of this other data. Mutually supporting. Right? Backed up by archaeological evidence of a Bigfoot using a atlatl to throw a spear against a seated pterodactyl with the same mouth structures, by the way.
If the Bigfoot were doing that back then, how come they're not hunting deer and elk and whatever's the same way now?
They are. 2013. They're bashing him in the head. It's called pinch point ambush.
Well, I mean, I thought that was a spear that one was tossing.
Sure. Maybe they are. We just haven't seen them. Don't know. I've read reports of them using tools. Clubs, fire, stone tools, even wearing partial clothing.
You'd think they'd have a sizable brain that would be active enough to create things like that. I mean, you know.
Absolutely. So if they wanted to, where's their houses? Where's their stone structures? Where's their cities? Where's their graveyards? Don't know. It's a good question. Which brings us to DNA. Everybody says, oh, DNA is so impressive. We're going to sentence me to prison for the rest of their life because we got the goods on you, man. You've done it. We had 3 murders. I showed you their footprints. I showed you their kid's footprint. I showed you his grandma's footprint. I showed you their pictures from 18,000 years ago and their footprints carved in solid stone. That's not a campfire story, people. That's hard science. Anthropological morphology, life cycle, archaeology, zooarchaeology, and rock stuff. Not campfire stories, science. So let's take a look at DNA. 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 And one of our students, thanks Deborah for printing this out for me. Because I had read this report from Dr. Melba Ketchum, but I didn't really understand the significance of it until you got to the back. And then I said to myself, oh my goodness. The first thing you need to get a DNA sample is Bigfoot hair. There it is. That is my personal sample from Dr. Meldrum. Bigfoot hair. Go ahead, pass it around. Just don't open it. That hair was given to Dr. Meldrum by Lori Simmons, whose father, she gave me this book. Her father was doing a lot of research up in King County, I believe it was, and habitation research, where he's communicating with his creatures a lot. And here's her book, and she's continuing her father's research. DNA. There's been 2 attempts at DNA at this point. Dr. Brian Sykes has been one of them. Not the greatest scientist, in my opinion, reputationally. However, from Cambridge, got a great reputation. The other one was Dr. Melba Ketchum. And she used 16 different samples, 3 different individual universities, and her cross-reference and her isolated whole genome SNAP analysis is quite impressive, to include evidence of genetic manipulation. Evidence of genetic manipulation to include non-human DNA. Non-human DNA. That just opened up a whole new can of worms. And Dr. Ketchum's site is underneath here. Feel free to go here and review her information, including one of the papers that I wrote, which is on her site. The analysis, according to Dr. Ketchum, a nationwide team from 14 different states. The Sasquatch halotypes came from Asia, Africa, and Europe. Asia, Africa, and Europe. Where did we come from? Exact same place. How did we get here? We walked. We walked the land bridge. They're saying this organism, as identified by its genome, has been genetically manipulated. In addition to that, its halotypes are European, Asian, and African, just like animals. If you see the pictures, which I've shown you, you see different facial structures, hair colors, body sizes, and structures. And yet, share the same morphology. Just like we do. Look around the room. Apes look the same, interspecies. Chimpanzees generally look the same, interspecies. Humans don't look the same, interspecies. We don't look, act, smell like anything else on this planet. Why is that? And why does this organism mimic our behaviors, our eating habits, our communication protocols, our cultural norms? How has it interacted all of these centuries with all of these ethnographic populations, like the Russians, Polynesians, Australian Aborigines, Native American and Amerindian First Nation Canadians, and South and Central Americans? The genome is a hybrid, a mixture of modern humans, Denisovans, Neanderthals, and that makes it a what? An ape? Relic hominid? There's only one thing left. It's a hybrid hominid of some unclassified variety, according to the DNA, according to the foot morphology, according to the archaeology and zoology, according to the Native American and Amerindian ethnographies. This is an elder brother, a primitive Indian with the understanding of speech, and has its own culture, language, and procreation and reproductive strategies. And modern science says it is potential unknown hominin. Period. Not a myth, a hoax, or an intergenerational global-wide hallucination. There's a creature, an organism, a species, several individual variations of that species roaming this world, successfully evading us. Yet we have evidence provided for us to examine on a daily basis. And the evidence is coordinated with archaeology. Prior to Ray Wallace and Rand Mullins and all the other fakes, at the end of the day, what you're seeing is a coordinated, scientifically examinable phenomenon that's leaving morphologically correct trace evidence. It's called neo-ichnological evidence. Behavioral evidence. Bone stacking is a hominin activity. It takes hands to bone stack. That's not me talking. That's already peer-reviewed science. Teeth marks on bones leave specific patterns in predictable and specific hemispheres of the bones. That's not me talking. That's already peer-reviewed published science. If you coordinate my research step for step with peer-reviewed science, it matches exactly. There is no daylight in any of it. I didn't invent it. I took the evidence and I compared it against already accepted peer-reviewed science. And it matches exactly. It matches this. And the DNA, of which everybody says may be contaminated by human beings, came out to hominin, unclassified hominin, with enough protocols in place in order to offset any potentiality of cross-contamination. You can read on our site. So, these aren't campfire stories. This is hard science. Bones, stones, footprints, butt prints, knuckle prints, dermal ridges, step and stride lengths, compliant gait, straight. Footprints are a dynamic signature of energy transfer to substrate. Seeing a fake is easy. All you have to do is look at this, the length of the stride step. Here's your first clue. Bones don't lie. Neither do stones. They don't change their story. They're repeatable, examinable, and available for everybody anywhere to examine at any place, at any time, as long as it's on camera. All right. Is there any questions today on this information? Before we just have a nice little chat and give you the opportunity to come down and take a look at this stuff. Any questions today about footprints?
Well, I was curious about the DNA that we talked about with the ancients and, then the DNA here. I mean, like our technology, we're creating animals. We could create extinct animals. We can clone. We can do all these things. And so that I'm having a difficult correlation between Bigfoot and ET I can't really visualize a direct connection.
I understand.
I sort of think it's a individual creature that is a species that, you know, and we're not real familiar with, which there's thousands of them on the earth. We're finding new species all the
Right.
time. So that, but if it was connected to an ET in some ways, where people say that they see ET and Bigfoot hanging around each other, would it be a possible, you know, the possibility of an ET DNA genetically modified creature? But that, to me, that is a hard pill to swallow, actually.
I completely understand. And the further you get into this examination, the harder the pills get to swallow. I have seen evidence that reflects exactly what you're saying. It's flabbergasting. I mean, it's hard for me as a scientist to look at the other side, the ET side of it, and not be just overwhelmed. Okay, even myself. But I have seen evidence to suggest that that is indeed the case. Hopefully that will see the light of day really soon. I'll connect it to the orb situation as well. I have seen UFOs land at Bigfoot City. I have seen federal agents at Bigfoot City. I had a ship hover over my house last summer. It's all on videotape, twice. After I came back from Bigfoot City, I laid out some of these rock crystals in a display. 8 white crystals, 3 of them were taken, and a giant spear point was left for me. I'll bring that next session. It has the same extraterrestrial hieroglyphics burned into stone. 2 days later, on the 4th of July, I had a ship hover over my house. If you guys want to look at it, it's on Blue Rock Talk on YouTube. Mitchel Townsend, Bigfoot Leads to Aliens Research. Connie Willis is the lady's name. She's an ex-NASCAR executive. Blue Rock Talk on YouTube, Mitchel Townsend. You will see some organism, some kind of ship hover over my house in a black beam. This is 4 o'clock in the morning. Concentrate like this, and some kind of light creature come down over a stack of these artifacts and manipulate them on camera. And it left 2 messages. One was the shape of the organism that's depicted primarily in the other stones from another part of the site, and the other was 3 words. We are coming, whatever that means. First of all, I thought it was the cat messing around, right? So I go out and look at my security cameras, and then I see the whole thing. You'll see it on the videotape. And so, quite interesting. The stones on the other side of the dig have unexplained ships, transportation structures, all kinds of things. And I'm pretty sure that the other side of the dig, these are pretty straightforward, but the other one has multicolored pictographic stones that have been traced into the rock, and the molecular structure of the stone has been changed and colorized. So it looks like they're inlaid, but they're not taken out and reset. They're outlined, and the molecular structure has been changed in place. Impossible, but it is. These artifacts came from that same archaeological dig. And they reflect the same orientation mathematically and morphologically as what we're seeing collected by us ordinary people. All right. I have also seen this organism maintain some kind of camouflage. You can see its eyes poking through, big red glowing eyes. But you can't focus on the rest of it for whatever reason. I don't know why. I don't believe in magic. I believe in science. I don't believe that there's anything that we're seeing that science can't explain eventually. Right?
That one was possible.
Sure. Maybe they are. We just haven't seen them. Don't know. I've read reports of them using tools. Clubs, fire, stone tools, even wearing partial clothing.
You'd think they'd have a sizable brain that would be active enough to create things like that. I mean, you know.
Absolutely. So if they wanted to, where's their houses? Where's their stone, right? this organism has access to some kind of advanced technology. Whether it's generating it or it found it or something, I don't know. But I know that using a scientific understanding of any phenomenon and trying to frame it within a scientific method is not very easy above and beyond this aspect, because these other things that are happening, I can't explain them. I mean, but I can tell you they're happening. Not only to me, but they're happening to a lot of different people around the country. So again, for the purposes of the class, we're focusing on a flesh and blood creature that has DNA, that has hair, that leaves tracks that are measurable and leaves teeth marks and is depicted in archaeological and zooarchaeological evidence. That aspect of the phenomenon is for the next class, because I don't have the expertise and the level of research at this point to feel comfortable saying definitively that not only does Bigfoot exist, but it has special abilities. When I can document that material and provide it to all of you and say, okay, here it is, let's discuss it together. Then we'll talk about it. But at this point, for some reason, you say Bigfoot, everybody's like, oh my God. Then you say Bigfoot and aliens are like, that's it, dude, he's nuts. Craig, go get your boy, he's nuts, right? Okay, so intellectually, I'm all into the whole problem, all of it. Professionally, I go right up to this point and say, okay, that's where I got to stop, because we'll talk about it, we'll discuss it, we'll look at some new data and some great pictures. But until I can frame it with science, I'm not willing to risk my reputation, what shattered and tattered remains that are left of it. But I can tell you something, I've seen some pictures, and hopefully we might get a private viewing in our last class section. I'll ask the individual if she'd be willing to bring a couple of pictures that show the Bigfoot-related phenomenon, and we'll see what happens. That would be great. But primarily the last session is going to be, I'm going to wrap up the course, the evidence and the information, and then I'm going to give you a breakdown of the teeth mark information, the teeth mark evidence. And we're going to coordinate the taphonomy, or the teeth marks, bite marks, with the behavioral evidence, the neotechnology, that's contained in the paper that I'm writing to be published. Because at the end of the day, folks, that's the science. This stuff's all nice, and it adds to it, but the bottom line is it's the teeth marks that are going to prove it. The teeth marks. Forensics, that's right. You can poo-poo the DNA all day long, but the teeth marks and the bone stacking, that stuff continues to happen constantly. And you'll see the science behind the teeth marks and how we identify size, age, disposition, species, and culture. And not only will I give you my final, wrap it all up, I will make a classification. I'll give you a Linnaean classification on this organism, and I will stick to it. So in other words, I'll put my tattered reputation on the line in the Bigfoot community and say, this is what it is, here's its classification based on the evidence as examined. And then we can all sit around and have a big debate, all right? Because that's part of what we're doing, is you are the gallery of scientists who are examining my presentation. When I'm done with the capstone, then we're going to discuss it. We're going to discuss, is it real? Did it prove it? And does the evidence prove, or beyond a reasonable doubt, that it is a hybrid hominid? And I say it's a hybrid hominid, but I'm going to tell you what kind of hybrid hominid. Dr. Ketchum says Homo sapien. She says modern human. I disagree. I can't see it. I say somewhere between Homo erectus and Homo sapien with a mix of Denisovans and Neanderthal, because the teeth, folks, are Neanderthal teeth. Not ape teeth. No, relic hominid teeth. Neanderthal teeth. And what did Dr. Ketchum's paper say? Neanderthal and Denisovans. Again, mutually supporting, interlocking genetic, archaeological, zooarchaeological, and anthropological, morphological science. Interlocking and mutually supporting.
if nothing else, the legends put it way distant past from modern man.
Absolutely. So consequently, the preponderance of the evidence not only suggests, it also paints a picture, a profile. How'd they find Jack the Ripper? Never did. But they got a profile. That's what we're doing here. We're developing a profile. And then when other people look at these videos and they go to the field, like Nathan Rio did, he knew what he was looking at was not natural. He knew what he was looking at, that there was some professor out in Washington that was doing the same thing. Why? Because I looked for some different kinds of evidence and everybody else was looking for this stuff. Why? To get the ball further down the field. Not get another picture, get another footprint, get another video. Hard science, forensic science. You take this to their house, write it up in their words, publish it in their journals, and you defend it at academic research conferences. I took this to the 69th Annual Anthropological and Archaeological Research Conference in 2016. I presented to a packed house of tribal, governmental, and academic archaeologists and anthropologists. They were stunned. They couldn't believe somebody let me in the building, let alone gave me a book to speak. I brought all these, and they're like, oh my, who is this crazy dude? After the presentation, you wouldn't believe how many people came up to me quietly and said, you know what? I saw it. I believe it. You knocked it out of the park. Bottom line, bones don't lie. Bones and stones. End of the story is this. Something out there. It's leaving information. All different kinds, from all different cultures, from all around the world. Everybody's seeing the exact same thing. It's repeating itself.